Hey everyone, this is Kenlyn. It's October 23rd, and we get to dive into Gene Key 50, the shadow of corruption, the divine essence of harmony, and the gift of equilibrium. I'm going to use this opportunity to go a little rogue, and I love to do that as I contemplate these gene keys, which is exactly what they're for. I love how Richard Rudd brought them through and offered them as a way, as a springboard to a deeper inquiry for yourself in the moment. So I've been listening to his transmissions on Gene Key 50 and really sitting with this understanding of corruption. And at the same time as I'm doing that, I'm having an experience around women's health. And so I'm going to weave through this understanding of corruption and also some very potent and little discussed women's health issues that I think are fundamental, and we need to start talking about them. So Gene Key 50 is really about, like, what he says is data corruption. And indeed, if you have Gene Key 50 in your hologenetic profile, he says that you may come from a family that deals with corruption on either side, right? Law enforcement, or you may have a corrupt family lineage, people who are in power, but are not using the power wisely, but to manipulate and suppress other people. I'm kind of thinking right now I'm thinking of Martha Beck's story about the Mormon Church and her Harvard Harvard degrees and her academic credentials, and then her time in Utah. She talks about this in The Way of Integrity, and how all of it really collided for her when she had some awakening about her own past and her own abuse. And that would be a perfect example of the shadow of corruption and her growing up in that shadow of corruption. And of course, in places like that, we call them the ivory towers, right? Like academics or religions, like churches, like the Vatican, institutions that by their very nature, hierarchical nature, they're going to have corruption in them. It's just the way of it. When you have something that big, that powerful, that many people, you have corruption. So Gene Key 50, I'm curious if Martha Beck's birthday has been this week up to tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day of the sun in Gene Key 50. And then we go into this new moon eclipse, and we go into that in a different Gene Key 28. And I'll talk about that next Sunday. By the way, next Sunday, we're going to do the Ghost Kriya afterwards. So the hour after I do the live stream, we're going to get together for a Ghost Kriya, and I'll post the link in the bottom. You can join us live and do that, or you can join the replay. It's only $27 US. This Ghost Kriya for me is one of my favorites. It's known to clear the subconscious patterning because it goes directly into the past, and it's psychedelic in nature, I'm going to tell you, but there's no psychedelics involved. You don't need them. You just show up, and the entrainment in the music and what runs through your consciousness is so powerful. I do it every year around Samhain, that time in the Northern Hemisphere around Halloween and the Day of the Dead, where in Celtic traditions, you're ending the harvest and beginning the descent into winter, the descent into the dark, the descent into the void, the descent into the liminal space in between. This new moon kicks off Diwali in India. So there's so much happening on the outer world, and on the inner world, this new moon solar eclipse is the start of a portal. I love my astrologer calls it the wormhole, the time in between eclipses, when we're really getting a reboot of our system. honestly, I've already started. I don't know about you, but I have been in the frequency of this eclipse. It's like, I feel like it's culminating. Knock on wood. I'm like a little bit like, hold on for the ride. But I feel like it's already been up. I'm very clear about the stuff that it is that I'm here to release. And for me, the gratitude I have honestly about this period is that it's deep. It's deep childhood wounds and patterns that I have seen meted out over my whole life. And I've indeed worked with them. They've been really the basis of my spiritual path. I mean, you know, we get to come in with a lot of stuff in order to really have the motivation. And this is Gene Key 50 talks about this too. This is called cosmic order. And often it's a reflection of the spiritual path. That's the I Ching, Gene Key 50, cosmic order. And it's let me just make sure I got that. Let me make sure I got that right. He calls it cosmic. Yeah, it is cosmic order in the I Ching as well. He also labels it as Gene Key 50, cosmic order. And part of cosmic order is all the freaking disorder because the programming partner is chaos, Gene Key 3. So we're born into chaos. We're born out of chaos into chaos. And we're here as the mechanism of attunement. So this is an acoustical, musical gene key. We're here to sense the equilibrium. I like the word equipoise, actually. That's one of my favorite words, equipoise, because it's just this level of being self-possessed, of knowing who and what you really are in the middle of the chaos. And so it's always finding the still point in the chaos. It's not getting swept up by the extremes, which is part of Gene Key 50's shadow, is extremism. It's instead finding that still point and being able to calibrate on the still point. How can you do that? Through the acoustical vibration. So you actually feel, and I know you're that sensitive, that you can actually feel the vibratory shifts when you are out of alignment. And that has to do a lot about with our thinking, not necessarily about what's happening to us. Yeah. And this is really something that's going to be good to put into place over this wormhole. I mean, I laugh because I've been in it, deeply in it. And I'm grateful for it because this freaking pattern, I don't even know how many lifetimes I've had. I don't really do that kind of thing, but I'm sure somebody could tell me how many lifetimes I've had with this pattern. It's a very codependent pattern. And it came through the mother wound. And someday I'm going to freaking write a book on this because, wow, like who doesn't get initiated this deeply and doesn't write a book on it? So I will. Stay tuned, right? But I get to finish my initiation and who knows if I finish. It's spiral evolution, but I will tell you that I believe that this eclipse is here to clear and clean something, because what I want, literally what I want, is on the other side of it. I really want healthy partnership dynamics. I want a healthy way of moving through the world, of understanding who I am in a healthy way. And certainly so much of that's gotten cleaned up. I wouldn't be here if it didn't. And the eclipse is showing me the places that still need to be cleaned up. And it's happening through this dance with my mother. So, you know, pick your relationship partner. I'm sure it's coming through relationships because we just had the sun conjunct Venus in Libra. And Libra is about relationships and partnerships and really balancing the scales, isn't it? It's also walking your talk. It's the mirrored consciousness. And one of the readings, I mean, I like to just synthesize some of the posts and readings about the eclipse or astrology or the new moons and full moons. And, you know, one of them was so accurate to my experience, because I really don't care what people say it is. I want to know first what my experience of it is. And I hope that's true for you too. Always look to yourself first. What experience am I having? Just ask yourself. It's all right there, because the cosmos isn't in the sky. The cosmos is in here, in our embodiment. You know, it's Gene Key 50 talks about this as above, below, as you know, so we're a mirror. It's the mirrored consciousness. And that's what Libra is talking about, the mirrored consciousness. So in this version with my mother, it's awesome because I was super reactive growing up to our dynamic. And now that's completely gone because I see it as mirrored consciousness. I truly see it. It's not something I'm trying to see. That's part of Gene Key 50. Gene Key 50 is when you're on that path of equilibrium, you're working your shit. You're working your mind frame, your beliefs. You're understanding that nothing is separately real. But at first you're just like, yeah, but they do seem separately real and that they are literally doing something to me. No, not the case. But it takes you being on the mat, me being on the mat time and time again in order to really get that everything is a hologram of the one thing. So my mind, it's an intrapsychic play, if you want to put it in Freudian terms, psychodynamic terms, which I kind of like to play with sometimes. Everyone's an actor in my play. So I love like, even Colin Tipping, he wrote this book called Radical Forgiveness. And I read it years and years ago. And I really got like, oh my God, this is me and my mother. And the truth is that we had a deal. And I say the truth is, because it feels like truth, but I don't know. I can't prove it. I can just tell you that what feels resonant in me is that she and I had an agreement long before we incarnated into form. And we agreed that we would have this wounding together and that it would be part of my journey. And she can speak to her journey. I actually don't know what it is from her point of view. I'm not sure she can articulate it like that, but I've certainly been a huge source of like pain and suffering for her. I laugh because we're just all projecting all over the place in the other, our thing. So now I'm seeing, when I see her and our interaction, I'm literally seeing myself. I'm seeing my own mind. I have to really acknowledge the work of Byron Katie, because I remember her saying that what you're really afraid of when other people say something judgmental to you or critical, what you're really afraid of is that you already said it to yourself. Isn't that true? So really everything that I'm upset about, or I'm not even upset, but that gets me, that I notice, it isn't at the level of a big trigger, but I'm noticing like, the jabs. And I'm like, and that's because I've thought them. It's mirroring to me some very deep programming. I'm going to use that word programming because, I mean, after all, this is what the Gene Keys is about. The shadow frequency is being programmed. We're born into the matrix. We're born into the program. And part of our job is to see the program, to see that we're in the matrix, stop identifying with being in the matrix, pull ourselves away from being in the matrix and see that we're in the matrix. And then once we see the mirrored consciousness, that everything is one thing, that it's all a fractal of my own mind, that's the good news. Then I can just be with my own mind and really love it. So last night I went on my own journey, and I'm going to tell you about this health stuff in a second. And I went on my own sort of breath work. I think there's breath work that's very psychedelic. So it's like a gentle breath work with like microdosing, a little psilocybin. And I really went into a deep, deep, deep self-love. Deep. It was so good. So juicy. It was like I was with another person, but it was just myself. And that is the kind of stuff that literally heals those patterns. It takes the edges off of them. And so I have so much more compassion. I mean, I just feel that. I mean, I called my mother like an hour or so ago. And I just had like such deep love and compassion, for our journey. And I didn't have to speak to it. I just had, it was just my come from place. And so I know that this eclipse, and I'm just presencing this for you because who cares really about what it is over here? It's really a way to, I'm holding up a mirror for you to see what's over there. We are all on our own journey. I mean, literally, we're all on our own mental planet. As many people as there are contexts. And so you're on your own journey, and this eclipse is asking you to sever something. And that's what's interesting, because new moons are usually not that way. They are preparations of planting seeds in dark soil, in fertile, dark soil. Like if you think about the new moon, and you go outside, you can't see it until a few days later, there's like a sliver, right? But on the day that the moon is direct, the new moon is exact, you can't see it. And that's the time for planting these deep seeds. And I often say, like, 6 months later, when that same moon, so it's a new moon in Scorpio, it would be like when there's a full moon in Scorpio. It just gives me chills because I love these cycles. We won't see it until that cycle, but we plant seeds for the long haul. Some seeds come up, fast, like little chia seeds and alfalfa sprouts, but there are some seeds that we plant in the darkness, and we don't know that they're going to produce an incredible harvest later. That's a really good metaphor for the like growing a business, for example. We do a lot of things at the beginning in a startup that later we see the fruition of. Same things with our health, and we're going to talk about our health in this transmission. So Gene Key 50 is about cosmic order. And if you have this in your hologenetic profile, or if your birthday was the last few days or tomorrow, then you have this as your life work. And in your job is to get into action, sister, because one of the shadow patterns is passivity. It's thinking that you don't really make a difference. You don't really have a say. You don't really matter. And that is shadow, then that's dense shadow material. And so your voice and your part in the process is absolutely needed. Because if you think about it, each one of us, when we're focusing our intention around growth, around evolution, around waking up, don't you notice that the whole planet shifts, that we're experiencing an up level in frequency? It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because each of us is feeling it, and we take action in alignment toward it. So at the same time as I'm listening to Richard Rudd talk about Gene Key 50, and I'm contemplating corruption, I'm listening to the woman who wrote the double X brain, the XX brain. And let me just find my paper on that. It's up here. It's Lisa Mosconi, I believe it is. She wrote it. The foreword was written by Maria Shriver. You can find that on Audible or on Amazon. The XX brain. And it's really about achieving optimum health as a prophylactic to getting Alzheimer's. I don't have Alzheimer's in my family, and so there probably wouldn't be any reason why I would listen to that Audible, but I did on my drive yesterday or 2 days ago because I was part of a thread around menopause. One of the women who was in my Divine Feminine Summit, some of you know Claire Dubois, she has been diving deeply into menopause. And somebody posted about this book. So I started to listen to it, and I realized therein lies the corruption. Not only in our medical system, and that I think most of us know that there's corruption in our medical system. And part of the corruption in my mind is not just the cost, the exorbitant prices, the way it's delivered. It's also that the American Medical Association and other associations have literally hijacked. I say literally, but they didn't literally. They metaphorically hijacked the conversation. They hijacked and controlled the conversation around what is acceptable as a standard of care. And some of that really does serve us. And some of that is political and just serves to perpetuate their own beliefs and way of doing something to preserve the economic system that keeps funding them. Because at the turn of the century, the last century, 1900s, homeopathy was pretty much equal to like what we call now allopathic medicine, pharmaceuticals. But it's not anymore because the argument was won by the American Medical Association. So other countries like Switzerland is I think you can even, correct me if I'm wrong if you're in Switzerland, but the last I understood is in Switzerland, you can even have homeopathic care covered under your insurance. The Queen's doctor, one of her doctors, the former Queen who just passed, had a homeopathic doctor who, by the way, was also killed, I think, a couple of years ago. So that's just one example of the ways that there is corruption in the system. So there's been a renaissance. It's just like with the church, right? When the Catholic Church started to just clamp down on, no, this is what you need to believe. This is how you need to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to put something called you're going to hell on top of it, which could be like, something else in the world of medicine, you're going to die or we're going to sue you, whatever. It's like wielding that power through manipulation and control. Likewise, when that happens, there's a bunch of people who create new things because the equal and opposite always exists. And so we have a renaissance. We had a renaissance when the church did that, and now we have a renaissance in health. And in that renaissance, this book talks about the terminology. I used to call it concierge medicine. Now it's being called precision medicine. I love that term because what they're saying is that each body is very different. Each body mind is very different. And so we don't need cookie cutter medicine anymore. We need precision medicine. What's right for you? And herein lies the corruption, because women were never studied in these Alzheimer's studies. And this is what the XX brain or the XX brain book is talking about. She was the one here. Let me just make sure I have her name completely good. It's Lisa Mosconi, PhD. It's so cool. I'm only on chapter 3, but she was talking about dispelling myths around women's brain health in chapter 2. Chapter 3 is unique risks to women's brain health. And chapter 4 is the brain's journey from pregnancy to menopause. And then after that, it's all about taking action. It's about precision medicine. It's about labs. It's about diet, because literally 90-something% of Alzheimer's patients, it's not genetic. It's a very small sliver of genetics. And this is where I got to in the chapter that I've listened to. Most of it is lifestyle. And I'm going to include in that lifestyle, this is my interpretation, so read the book if you want deeper learnings. My intention here isn't to like have a book club. My intention is to point you to this thing of corruption. And the thing that's corrupt is our hormone system. It's interesting to say it that way. It's the one thing in nature that I'm personally baffled about, because that's the part, our hormones have not kept pace with our evolution, and evolution is going really fast. But in a woman's system, once we hit menopause, what happens is we don't make many hormones. We make our estrogen out of our cortisol, and most of us are just our adrenals, and most of us are freaking fried. So we're not doing the right thing. And then we're following these different diets, and those diets could be hamstringing our efforts. Like, that's my experience. I knew I had to go on a complete overhaul with my system. And, there's just so much to say in that. And I think some of it's worth saying just because as women, we really need to share our journeys so that it gives permission to others who listen to go on their journey and to really dig in deeper. And maybe I will in a few minutes, but I do want to say that that's the corruption. Like in the past, many millennia ago, we would just die at this age. We would be grandmothers and we would die as midlife women, and we would make way for the new generations. That was the cycle of life. And now we're living longer. And yet we have this hormonal system that has just stopped. And what I'm gleaning from this book is that the interplay between estrogen loss and Alzheimer's is just becoming really known. So they're calling it, like, when you enter into menopause, it's tripping the wires, in other words, of Alzheimer's. And what she said is that men do have an equivalent called andropause to menopause. But the thing is that their testosterone converts into estrogen. So they're never losing the estrogen that we're losing. And estrogen, from one of my research a long time ago, is responsible for, I think somebody said like 400 functions in the body, but that it's like that we know of. There's probably way, way, way more. And there are certain things that, as something triggers something that triggers something, it's a chain reaction. It's signaling. Everything is talking. Your body is a symphony, and everything is talking to each other. So Alzheimer's hits 2 out of 3 people are women. You get that? I never knew that statistic. So I never knew, A, that it was related to menopause. And I never knew, B, that more women than men get Alzheimer's. On the list of things that people die from, men are most susceptible, except for that one thing, Alzheimer's. The average age of a woman right now is 82 and men 77. And what she was saying is that gap is closing because men are taking better care of themselves now. Interesting, right? And who are the caregivers? As she mentions in this book, the caregivers of the people with Alzheimer's are women. So we are doubly burdened by caregiving and by the disease. So why am I bringing that up besides the fact that it's super important? Well, I'm a stand for feminine empowerment. And when I realized that most women are past a certain age, which is really 45, past the age of 45, that's where the seeds of this start, are uneducated, are in survival mode, and know that they're not going to die soon and want to be a part of co-creating a balanced world. At least people that work with me, they want to be in their leadership. They want to step up. And yet physically, they're exhausted, they're tapped out, they're caregiving, and they're dealing with health issues. So that was like a huge wake-up call. So the women I serve, in other words, through the work that I do, are being hit disproportionately and probably to an extreme, because in what she said too is in 2050, the numbers go to half the population, something like that. I may be like, don't quote me on all the statistics, just read the thing. But because I was listening to them, not writing them down, but listening to them just in this state of wow. But by 2050, it's increased. And now I know that like Zach Bush, triple MD, has talked about glyphosate as part of the autism to Alzheimer's chronic disease. So we have glyphosate in our system. That is a herbicide and toxin that really kills the endocrine system. Can you hear that? It functions like an antibiotic, and it strips plants of its ability to nourish us. And then we take it in and we have glyphosate in our system. And then that breaks down our gut. And when our gut is broken down, we don't have access to neurotransmitters. Do you see like the cascade? So a lot of us are working to get glyphosate out of the environment. And unfortunately, companies like Monsanto, and they sold to Bayer, now it's Bayer that owns this. I think I just read recently that they promised to take it off the market in a certain time, but it's like, really? Take it off now. And what Zach Bush says is that the problem has never been farmers. The problem is the way that it was marketed by advertising agencies to the individual homeowner. So we're like dousing our driveways with glyphosate, and then it leaches down into the water table, and it's freaking killing all of us. So I know the women that I know want to be a stand against those kinds of things and for a planet that is healthy and in balance. And it's really up to us. It's our role to do. And how are we going to do that if we're sick? How are we going to do that if we're tending to the sick like 24/7? Like, we're not. So there's the corruption. So to get to harmony, we have to find this place of equilibrium. We have to find that fine tuning in our system. It's a tone. And sisters, what I'm going to tell you is you have to find a baseline. Some of you think you're normal, but you're not normal. You know, you're far below, you're depleted. So your job is to get yourself to a higher level of baseline and then begin to calibrate to that baseline. How am I feeling vis-a-vis like what I know I can feel? And that might be me herbal support. That might be homeopathic support. That might mean bioidentical hormone support. Recently, so here's the end of the story. Recently, as I was doing Gene Key 50, listening to the XX brain, I am texting a woman who is the NAD concierge. And it turns out she's already in my phone, and I had already talked to her 3 years ago. And now NAD, and I'm going to read what that is. Nicotinamide, adenine, dinucleotide. Like, you can tell I'm not in science. NAD. I'm going to read what it is. It's found in all cells and is essential to living. I love this line. NAD bathes the brain cells in nutrients, and the result is improved brain health and function. It was discovered in 1906, but wasn't until the 40s when doctors began to understand the true potential. So it's basically, he says it's required for the fundamental biological processes that make life possible, from metabolism to DNA repair. So some of us and older, in our second and third acts, what we have is metabolic disorders. And NAD is being tested and studied to support that. The thing about it is there are no negative side effects to this. It's in all of your bodies. When you're a baby, you have a lot of it. When you're older, you have a lot less of it. If you have been drinking alcohol, you have even less of it. So NAD is one of the ways that people work with addictions. Like, this is the most genius thing that I've heard, detoxing from fentanyl, like that toxic fentanyl that's been laced in a lot of drugs, alcohol, opiate addiction, heroin. People are using NAD to support the detox process and the wellness process. It's not just detox. It actually like supports your brain. And, movie stars had access to it because it used to be really expensive, and it used to like require a full day of IV drips, and, people would have access to it to really rejuvenate themselves. But now it's available in patches. And this woman I just contacted while I'm listening to all of this and really contemplating corruption says, yeah, come, you can wear a patch for 12 hours. And I got 800 milligrams of NAD, wore the patch for 12 hours. I wore it while I slept, and I did that Friday night. I woke up with like a headache, and she said, you were probably detoxing. But then within hours after that, I started to feel really good. And today I feel really good. And I'm going to go on this protocol. And it was literally 1/10 the cost. People have asked me, I don't get any money from this, but I'm just excited about it. It's one of the hacks that we need to use to bring ourselves up to baseline. And I'm just an explorer. I will always be exploring in the reverse aging because I love being in a body. I love being here and I love being in a body. And as long as I'm here, my body gets to function at optimum levels. That's the contract I have with my body. That's the contract I have with my brain. And that's just what's happening. So in my field, as I go do things, I get things that come into my field. They're literally magnetized to me. So think about Gene Key 50 as having like having the frequency, because it's frequency. So it exists in the aura. And when things are frequencies that exist in the aura, it actually magnetizes to you. So it's pulling to me the things that I need. And my intuition, I get to check, like, is that for me? And I just got a total yes. And what I love about it is when that happens, it all aligns. So this woman happened to be in like literally the town next to my mom. And I was visiting her and she was like, stop on over and grab the patch. However, she ships all over the world with dry ice. You have to be able to receive it within 24 hours. And she's getting that all like down. She has a proprietary patent that's pending on the delivery system. So this technology is coming out for our use. And sisters, what I'm saying is use the freaking technology that's available to you. Do not ignore this anymore to the extent that you have. I mean, some of you have not, but to the extent that you have, like, it's time to freaking get on it, because it's possible to rejuvenate our system. It's possible to reverse the signs of aging, and it's possible to hack the corrupt code of menopause. I'm going to call it that. I know some of you are going to get triggered by that because, you know, you like to think that it's all natural, but honestly, we should be dead. So we're having to hack around the fact that that the biology has not kept path. And, you know, and in part of me, that's fine, because otherwise we would be having babies right now. We don't need to be having more babies, right? So, you know, life is complex. There's so many layers of complexity. So I'm going to end from here. If we really want to bring in the true harmony, and that's the harmony that's inside of this corruption, we're going to do it through equilibrium. We're going to do it through the balancing act. The balancing act that you have to do with your own body, that I get to do with my own body, and I'm feeling it. I don't know about you, but my system is as sensitive as a racehorse. So it knows when something is off. And then normally I just acknowledge that. And I sometimes go looking, but I know that I will magnetize the answers to me. And maybe this transmission is one of the things that you have asked, but you didn't even know you were asking for the universe. So sisters, let's get on it. Let's get our health good. Let's be the change in the world through our own example of the way that we restore our own health and our own bodies. All right. With that, I'm going to end. Lots and lots of love to you. Have an incredible new moon. And I will see you on Sunday, October 30th for the Ghost Kriya. And if you're not on my mailing list, drop me a comment. I will put you on, and that way you'll get the emails to it. And you'll also get, on October 27th, I'm going to be on a panel talking about the gene keys. All right. Lots and lots of love.